It's weird because you're sitting there. Oh, hi. Hi, everybody. We may still be trying to get our camera sorted here. We may also be 100% sleep deprived. Well, I'm 100%. No, I had 1 hour of sleep last night. Lisa had two and a half. But we made it through an entire day today, the first day of the Science and Spirituality Conference here on Vancouver Island in the strange little town of Nanaimo. I'm not necessarily recommending you put this on your top of your TripAdvisor wish list, but we are amongst the giants of our industry, and that is what we are here for. So Lisa and I wanted to do a little live. It's going to be quite a little live, mostly because we are so tired. It's ridiculous. So we're hoping for a really good sleep tonight so that tomorrow for Joe Dispenza will be completely high vibing. So I am currently in my pajamas. I don't think she is.
No.
Anyway, so we can't kind of figure out, how to actually put the camera on both of us. Maybe if I do that. Hi, everybody. No, no, it's not going to work. So she's not going to be in it for a minute because she's disruptive and she's knocking the camera over. So we had a glorious day today. We managed to stay awake. There was a point where I had to start tapping on my fingers quietly saying, even though I have this fear that I am going to lose consciousness in front of Gregg Braden, we managed to get through it. And Lisa seems to be a walking apothecary, and she provided me with some incredible things to keep me awake, and then I did some yoga and stuff and we got through it. But what we would like to do is for each of us just to share our big takeaway from today. Today was a full day workshop with Gregg Braden, spiritual scientist. Obviously that's what the whole mission of this conference is to bring the science of spirituality, the evidence base of spirituality, and Gregg is a leader in that. He is definitely the person who has been with me the longest on my journey. I'm quite new to Joe's work, but Gregg's been in my life for a really long time. And if you're not familiar with Gregg Braden, his most famous book is probably The Divine Matrix, although I think his work now that's coming out, Resilience from the Heart and Human by Design, is really very groundbreaking and very exciting. So
can we mention quickly, because Human by Design, which is his latest book, he was just telling us today that the United Nations is actually basing some of its future plans and goals on a couple of the principles out of his book. So that's kind of really exciting, considering we sit in that field and the United Nations is moving in and using some of his work. So we're all kind of lining up, guys.
Yeah. Yeah, so that is particularly around the overcoming or debunking of the Darwinian notion of evolution, which has been really formally debunked, but is for some reason being kind of defended in lots of places, which means that often our children are being educated with bad and outdated science. But the theory of evolution does not apply to humans. There is zero evidence for how it applies to humans, and there's lots of exciting evidence for what is real and true about the nature of how anatomically modern man or modern human, came into being. But that's not what I want to talk about today. So what I wanted to just share with you is my one big takeaway from today, which was something that I actually heard from Gregg when he was in Melbourne a year ago, and it was really so groundbreaking in my brain that I didn't write proper notes, and it didn't end up being in his Human by Design book, which hadn't come out then. So I Googled it and I couldn't find it, and I knew I'd have to wait until I saw him again or his next book came out. But today was the day where I kind of got to hear what he had to say again. So I've got some notes, but I've also got my friend here who's a scientist, and she'll be able to correct me if my language isn't quite right. Basically, what Gregg was explaining, which is very exciting because it matches the Hermetic laws as we understand them, the 3 Hermetic laws, in particular the second Hermetic law, as above, so below, as within, so without. And the idea that Gregg was explaining is that when we get inspired to create something, when we are feeling called to step outside of our normal everyday routine and the normal limits of what we imagine ourselves to be, and we feel inspiration move us, and we feel drawn to go deep inside of us to access parts of ourselves that we do not access in ordinary life, when that energy comes into you, it's actually about you having that courage, I guess, to stick or keep your focus and attention on that idea for long enough for it to come into fruition. And this is not just in 3D reality, but actually what's happening neurologically is that new neural pathways are forming. So that inspiration, that sense of wanting to create something bigger than yourself, bigger than your limits, is what inspires you or what inspires the brain to form new neural networks. And so the brain, the neuron begins to reach out from itself in this beautiful pattern. It looks like a spider's web. These neurites reach out looking for other neurons to form bonds with and to create new neural pathways, which will allow this new thing that you want to birth into the world to come into fruition. And what Gregg was explaining is that is a process that takes 72 hours. So one thing that I haven't been able to ask him is about, is that, and we're talking about this before, is that like consistently 72 hours in a row? And I have mentioned this to some of the third level priestesses before. But regardless of whether it's a consistent 72 hours of focusing on the same thing with no deviation in thought, which seems sort of impossible, or whether it's that you just stay present to that new feeling, that new inspiration, that new creativity, that new idea that you want to bring into the world without letting those low vibrational thoughts and feelings interfere and disrupt. So those self-defeating, fear-based emotions will necessarily kind of contract or reduce that process of these new neural pathways forming. But if we can, I guess, be protective of that time frame where those new neural pathways are forming, then bringing something new into fruition, whatever it is, whether it's a book you want to write, or whether it's a play you want to write, or whether it's a piece of music you want to learn, or a business you want to start, you will be able to encourage the success of it by staying in that sort of protective energy. Now, that's what I'm saying. That's my language around it. But the idea is, of course, that we understand that consciousness is what creates. And so if Gregg's saying that it's 72 hours for these new neural pathways to form, to find other neurons and to form these new networks, then we can imagine that we have to be protective of our conscious thoughts and our subconscious thoughts in that time period. And here's the really beautiful thing, and it's the last thing I'm going to say before I hand over to Lisa, is that the way that Gregg describes these neural pathways as the neurons reaching out to find new neurons to attach to create these new pathways, so this new way of being can be birthed into your reality, is its soft antenna that is actually reaching out into the field to access the information that is required to bring this into reality and to pull back that information into your consciousness, so that you have what you need to make it real. And of course, all of this, what is in the field, is everything that ever was and ever will be. And so whatever we need to bring something new into life, a new project, a new business, and a new idea, is going to be accessible if we sustain what we understand to be a high and light vibration, which is protective of these new neural pathways that are forming in the brain, that will allow that information to travel with ease. And of course, he was talking all about heart coherence as a strategy for doing this, but that not just going into heart coherence, but then actually using that state, that high vibrational state, to create. And we could go on and on about the ways that you can do that, but we understand that the very best way to do that is to go into that state of the high and light vibration, and then to hold in the mind in an agendaless way what it is that we are inspired to create. So we allow that vision to rise up, and then we hand it over. So that's what I wanted to share. Is it was a bit more of a clarification of what I'd heard last year and was really excited about. It fits all of our understanding of, as within, so without the second Hermetic law, and that it's simply not possible to create, excuse me, it's simply not possible to create in 3D reality from a place that is holding a low vibration, because 3D is a mirror of what it is that we are holding vibrationally. So my voice seems to have stopped, so I'm going to hand over to her now, and she's going to tell you about, what is it? You take the floor.
Okay, here I am. Hello, everyone. Very excited to be here. This is actually really exciting for me because it kind of flows on from the other information I've been sharing, both in a live the other day and in a post or a live that I did in another group with Bronte Spicer during the week. And it's information that I've heard before, and I couldn't quite get my head around the significance and how it fitted in with the importance of what we know. Now, as people know, for me, knowing and understanding the truth of who we are sets us free to become the most magnificent expression of ourselves in this world. And this information is quite phenomenal. We're talking about, so as I've said, and as Ricky mentioned earlier, the notion, Darwin's theory of evolution has been debunked. Even Darwin, by the end of his time on this planet, said that he was fairly sure that it actually was not going to continue to reign true for humans. So evolution per se does exist, but it falls apart in the notion of humans. And what is really beautiful, and I've got a few notes because there's a few important dates and figures, is that 200,000 years ago, what happened was the creation of what we call chromosome 2. So this is a chromosome within our DNA, and chromosome 2 is the second largest collection of human chromosomes, so that's the one we have the second most of. It's 8% of our DNA in each cell. And it is the chromosome that's responsible for our enlarged brain or neocortex, so our occipital, all those lobes that sort of sit over our reptilian brain and our survival brain. It's the bit that makes us human, and it's responsible for our sympathy, empathy, self-regulation, language, morality, emotions, all of that sort of stuff. And it actually came into being 200,000 years ago. And what they have realised happened is that the highest living life form at the time was a primate. Now, this does not mean that we evolved from primates, because evolution requires time. It's a slowly changing process in response to environmental factors. This is not what happened here. In primates, what happened was that two chromosomes came together and fused in a very unique way. Normally when chromosomes fuse to reproduce themselves, they fuse at what we call a centromere, which is a little bit in the middle of them. Half of the chromosome kind of breaks away and gets reabsorbed by the body, and you have an identical looking chromosome to the two that came together. With chromosome 2 and how it came into being, that's not what happened. What happened was, and now you've probably heard a few of us talk before, or you may know about telomeres, which are the little bits on the ends of the little chromosomes. You know, the little chromosomes, those little funny X-shaped things? And on the ends of them are these little caps, like shoelace caps, and they're responsible for the longevity of life, and they help to keep the chromosome intact and growing and healthy and managing its size, so to speak. Now, what happened with this creation of chromosome 2 was telomere to telomere, these chromosomes joined. Now, this is an incredibly unique process and has never been seen or heard of since or before. It's only occurred to create chromosome 2. And what's unique about chromosome 2 is it then ended up, as you can imagine, with two telomeres in the middle and a centromere sort of on either side. So you then end up with a telomere at the top, a telomere at the bottom, two telomeres in the middle, and then two centromeres. What then happened is the centromeres kind of were deactivated. Again, something that's not happened before and has never happened since. It only happened to form chromosome 2, which is the chromosome responsible for our neocortex, our absolute humanness. This happened in a very short space of time. It didn't occur over time like evolution would suggest. So what they're now saying is that the timing of this was so sudden and so precise for these bits of information to be decoded, shut down, and the way it joined, it was so precise that what they're suggesting between the timing, the precision, the result is that this was something beyond evolution. And the suggestion is that it was a mutation that suggests intention. So the scientists are absolutely in agreement that there seemed to be some sort of intent behind this unique fusion of these chromosomes to form chromosome 2. What then happens, of course, is the scientists put up their hands and go, okay, this is forbidden territory for us as scientists. This is not science anymore. If we're talking about intention, we then have to say whose intention, who and why and how did this come into being. So that's the information that Gregg Braden is suggesting, that as they continue to search and look for further evidence of what went on here, these things will start to be discovered. Of course, for those of us who work within this group and within this field, it's very evident where that intention came from.
No, I totally
totally disagree with that.
Do you?
There's no strong evidence. There's
No
100
evidence.
versions of truth.
Yes, no, that's right.
But there is no one story.
No, there's no, and that's the thing. No, there's no one story. But this is what Greg was saying, is that every culture on Earth has their own story, but the stories are very similarly based, that there was a higher force of some type that created it. So depending on the culture from which you come from, or religion or whatever, everyone has their own story about how that came into being. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, and I think it's important. I don't know
Yes.
if you can hear me. I think it's important that what we don't do is get caught up in what that story is. What's the true origin story of the modern human? It's the idea that at this point, what the evidence can help us understand is it's like a bit like cause versus meaning. Who knows what the true cause is? We may never know. But the meaning is that we are unlimited now, right now, in human form. We have abilities that are dormant because evolution has effectively shut down the conversation about what is stored inside of us.
Yes, and
so I
that's
think
exactly
that's
what's
what's
saying.
important. I mean, otherwise we start getting into conspiracy theory, and we start getting into, whose version of truth is right. That may never be proven. I interrupted. Sorry, I
you're
totally
fine.
interrupted her. Maybe it's more exciting. It's a bit like I'm going to cut up some pie now.
She's very tired. I was actually quite impressed with your intervention. Was brilliant, RJ. It was really, really good. So yes, and so to reiterate what Ricci-Jane's saying, the importance and an amazing and exciting thing about this is because this has been such a unique process, what it actually now tells us is there is more to be found within who we are because of the fact that we have not evolved as was previously thought. And the other most important thing is that with evolution came the concept of survival of the fittest. And what this process shows very clearly is that it is a process of collaboration between, both with what Ricky was explaining earlier about neurites, searching each other out to collaborate together to form these new ideas, and the fact that this was a very unique collaborative process between these two chromosomes to form chromosome 2 to create who we are. So really the question that is actually most exciting is, therefore, what else is possible? Who are we really? And woohoo, absolutely. J-Ma, let's go off with that sense of, wow, what is possible? And that's certainly what I'll be sort of hoping to hear more of from Jo tomorrow, if I don't swoon too much, Tamsin. We'll be bringing you some exciting bits from Dr. Jo tomorrow. I'm not sure when, because we're going out for dinner, Ricky, but we'll let you know in the group tomorrow and find some time to come and have a chat with you about tomorrow's exciting stuff. So if you've got any questions, because that's quite complex kind of stuff, I'm actually kind of impressed with myself that I managed to bring all that together and explain it as well as I did, because it's quite complex stuff, but obviously I was more tuned in than what my brain trying to shut me off to sleep would suggest I was. Anyway, have a lovely evening, you all. We're off to eat our yummy pie and go to bed. Oh, bath and then bed. Bye-bye, everyone.